Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to another Germinator session. My name is Alon Eisenstein. I'm a professor here at the University of British Columbia in the School of Engineering in the Okanagan, and we are here looking over the Okanagan Lake on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Seal Okanagan. And this is something that is always breathtaking for me to look at the scenery, especially coming here from a place like Toronto, which is so overdeveloped. I think we take for granted the beauty of nature around us. So I like to always start with this picture to remind people of where we live and recognize the Seal people who have lived here long before any European settlers set foot on this vast continent. Before I turn it over to today's guest, I want to start by acknowledging and saying thanks to ETCBC for funding that allows me to continue doing this guest speaking series. And now moving on to today's guest, which is Connor. Oh, am I not sharing screen? I thought I am sharing screen.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on my side.
You can still see the slide, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Connor is the co-founder and CEO of Just Vertical. A quick introduction. Connor went to McGill University, got a BA in Environment and Development and a minor with law. He then went to U of T to get a Master's of Science in Sustainability Management. And amongst other things he got to do in life, which is probably more exciting than any of these two degrees, is being a TV chef, going on a game show in China. I'm assuming it's in China, right? The Chinese game show, meaning it was the Chinese television.
Yes.
You can tell us about that later. And got to speak at the United Nations. And he'll tell us a bit about Just Vertical and how he gets started. But if you Google some of his bio online, you'll see that he really likes tacos and really hates cilantro going bad, which is as good as any reason to start a company, I would say. So to date, Just Vertical sold over 1,500 units. Is that number still going up? I hope.
Still going up.
Yeah. And most impressively, he was recognized as Clean 50 Emerging Leader and Top 30 Under 30 Sustainability and Human Rights Leader. And I've known him for many years, since Just Vertical was barely budding, pun intended. And so I think with that, I'll stop sharing and pass on the spotlight to Connor and then ask, how are you, Connor?
Good. I'm really good. Excited to be here. Excited to see you again. It has been a few years.
So I asked you to join us today, and you know, we have a few students in the online session, and we have a student here in the room with me. And the reason I have these sessions is really just kind of picking people's brains. Why did you start a company, and what were you thinking, and what did you learn along the way?
Yeah, a lot there. You kind of alluded to it, but you know, the thing I've always said is I started Just Vertical purely out of frustration of cilantro going bad. I don't know if anyone else has been there. It only comes in that one size from the grocery store, and you use half of it and end up throwing the rest away. And I'm just like, I love tacos and I never get through it. So I assume everyone else must be having this problem. So for me, it was, you know, quite simply like, I live in Toronto, I live in a condo. How can I grow my own cilantro? So I only have to pick what I need.
So the solution is just grow your own in a condo in Toronto.
Yeah, you know, just make a company that can figure out how to do this and, you know, deploy it across the country, and that's it. But you know, it seemed like such a simple thing that somebody else, you know, would have would have thought of. Like everyone has this issue. It's like that's a story I tell, and everyone resonates with everyone, whether it's cilantro or that box of spinach you can never go through that goes bad. It's just a pervasive everyday problem that kind of nagged at me. And my grandma, of all people, loves to complain about it constantly. So it was just, how can I solve that problem for me and for others?
So, I teach entrepreneurship right now, right? And in my classes, I told students, any idea you thought of, there's already a solution out there, right? And so if you still want to build it, you don't have to say, well, it exists, I can't build it. You have to say, well, how is mine going to be different or better or serving somebody who doesn't already have this solution? What was your experience? How did you figure out, like, where do you fit in the world of cilantro farming in condo buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started, there was already a company in our space worth $100 million who was in the middle of, they were half owned by Scott's Miracle-Gro, one of the largest gardening companies in the world. And I'd like to say, hindsight's 2020, and I identified a market niche of indoor gardens that looked good, that looked like furniture that would fit in with decor. But the real truth of it is the first version that my co-founder Kevin and I made of an indoor garden that we both brought home, our partners at the time said, it's great that that's growing food, but it's ugly and can't be in my house. So that's quite honestly how we found our niche was, we went out there with a pure lab tech version of how can we grow the most food as efficiently as possible. And people came back and said, I love the idea of growing my own food. I love the sustainability aspect, but I don't want to give up counter space. And I spent thousands of dollars to make everything else in my house look good. This has to too. So that's how we found our niche of building an indoor garden that is not only productive, but looks and feels like it belongs in your home and is, a decorative statement piece as well.
And so I guess kind of putting it in a more challenging way, you're basically selling a product. And so the assumption would mean that, okay, let's get an interior designer or industrial designer. Let's build a factory, a manufacturing line. If you do the math, you probably need upwards of $20 million just to get things, building your first.
Yes. Yeah. It can be really daunting when you do it. Okay. When you think, okay, how am I going to get from where I am now to the scale of selling 1,000 of these a month? But we kind of did it stepwise, going from 0 to 1. Like the first few, they weren't pretty. We built them ourselves to get the feedback. Did what a lot of other hardware companies do, where it's, we brought it to trade show and we started to generate pre-orders, which we did just enough to get that first little bit of funding to go to an industrial designer and say, can you build me a production prototype of this? Again, use that to build more pre-orders. And then we actually found, okay, we couldn't afford the factory. We couldn't afford the injection molds, everything. So we ended up 3D printing a lot of pieces. And we actually built a small wood shop, and I learned how to do woodworking and built everything by hand for the first few hundred units. And, that process probably took us 1.5 years, those few sentences there.
So if you can't get the money, you do it yourself.
That's it. There's a lot of stuff you end up just quite honestly having to do yourself. And, I barely knew how to use a drill when I started this company, and ended up running a full woodworking shop. And yeah, you kind of figure it out as you go. And it doesn't have to be, perfect and optimized from day one.
So I want to kind of take a step back, and I'm here at the School of Engineering, and I work with engineers, and one of the things that I see very pervasive is not wanting to show your ugly kid to the world, and now you said, you built the first unit, you brought it home, your partner said that's ugly, get it out. So that's kind of in the family. That's kind of keeping your dirty laundry indoors.
Mhm.
Did you actually show like strangers, like customers, those first ugly versions, or did you have to spend that extra mile to get it nice finish and all the all the bells and whistles before you were brave enough to show it to people?
Well, we absolutely did show people the ugly version, and we even delivered some to people, the ugly version, and it is, there's no way to get around, like, you need feedback, you need people to test it. And the perfect version of 2 years ago is going to be different from the perfect version today. It's something you always chase, and the quickest way to get to that perfect, or the more perfect version, is to get people hands-on, testing the product, using the product. And as long as you're honest about it, people can be very forgiving, especially people who know they're purchasing the first versions of something. They expect there to be, defects. They expect there to be issues. As long as you're honest and you say, this is the first time we've delivered one of these, or this is our first prototype. What can we improve? What can we do better? It's going to accelerate the process. It's definitely humbling sometimes when people are like, this is terrible, this is bad, got to fix this. And it's just part of the experience.
And so, what you're saying is it's not finished, it's not perfect, it might even break, but I should probably see what other people think before getting it perfect. What was the best outcome from that experience? Like, what was the thing that somebody told you about your unfinished first version, or maybe it was already the second version by that point? What was that one thing that you learned from people that you were completely blindsided, you weren't aware of?
Yeah, it was, for me, going into this, like, I come from an agricultural background. Like, I know how to grow plants. I've worked on farms. To me, that part was just super easy. And it was actually the design part that was tough. And I found when I was building these things myself, I would get obsessed over like little minor details and defects that you see when you're building it. And you're like, oh, somebody's going to notice this, and like, this is really hard. Whereas the growing aspect, I was super keyed in on. I'm like, oh, anyone can do this. When I got it out there, it was the opposite. There was a lot of little visual aesthetic things that only somebody would notice who's building it, because you're paying attention to every detail. And I realized quickly, we're selling this to people who have never grown a plant before. And we actually need to focus on optimizing the growing experience, and how that works versus, obsessing over these little details. And, a cool story we have about just being honest about these things is the first person we ever sold an indoor garden to, was a guy named Chris. He runs an indoor green home renovation company. He pre-ordered it. He waited a year and a half. He got the first one we ever made. It leaked all over his office constantly, because he didn't know how to trim the roots. The lights would flicker on and off. Cords were kind of octopused out. And eventually he's like, guys, I really like it, but like, I can't have this in the office. Like, it's leaking, it's an issue. Let me know when you fix it. And about 2 years later, we ran into him at a trade show, showed him one of our newest versions, and he's like, I love it. This is exactly what I was envisioning that first time around when I gave you all that feedback. And he now has one of the new ones in his office and in his house, and just loves it. So it goes to show people aren't going to hate you forever. And this was worst case scenario. I was spilling water in this guy's office in his boardroom. They don't hate you forever. Like, they know what they're getting into. And as long as you're honest and say, here's what we're doing to fix it, then it can turn out for the best.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know otherwise, right? Because it's all in your head.
Yeah, exactly. It's all in your head, and you never know what other people are going to struggle with, or what defects may come out at scale, because all of us have unique experiences that we apply to products.
So maybe the one thing that I'm always kind of, worry of is, by the time I ask you to step in and talk to students, and we're having this interview and other people will see the recording, say, well, how many years have you been working on it right now? It's like, is it 10 years now, or just less than 10 years?
Yeah, for us, we're about 5 years in.
5 years in. So hindsight is 2020. And now that you've kind of showed the ugly kid to customers, you got the feedback, you have hindsight valuable, right? You know how valuable it is. But back then, like, were you worried of putting that, again, what ended up being a leaky, ugly piece of octopus wiring thing in somebody's boardroom? Like, where do you get the courage to even deliver something like that?
Yeah, I was absolutely like riddled with stress. Sometimes you'd almost be like a little, ashamed, being like, this isn't what I want to deliver. But it was something that was drilled into me by going to talks like this when I was a student, going through incubators, and then saying like, you need to do this. Like, this is non-negotiable. And just kind of believing in the process. It can be very, very hard when you're in the moment to be, no one wants to show something that they're not 100% proud of, but it's trusting the process and trusting in people who have done this, 10 times over already before you are saying it. Like, you got to trust that advice. And part of it too is, we're fortunate we went through a lot of accelerators, and we saw peers who, didn't get things to market. They just kind of toiled in the background, fiddling with things for years on end. And if it never goes to market, you're never going to sell it. You're never going to be able to get to that next level, of product. So it was really trusting the process, trusting advisors, and, believing that not everybody makes it up when they say this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you listened. It wasn't my advice. I wasn't giving you the advice back then, but I'm glad you listened to all the other smart people in the room. I guess another follow-up question, which kind of, again, thinking about how do people think about entrepreneurship? You said it took you, what, a year and a half to get your first product to the first customer? Was it a year and a half?
Yeah, we did about a year and a half to get our first one. We tried licensing other people's hardware at the start to get initial feedback, but yeah, a year and a half for our first product.
So I guess my question is, if we go through the regular, business model canvas, lean canvas, all these tools, one of the things that you're always asked to report on is key metrics, right? How do you know you're actually getting to where you want to be, that you call success? And it's true for software. It's even more true for hardware. Pre-revenue, the only thing you can report on is how big of a hole am I digging myself into with expenses. And of course, that's not a comforting key metric to say I'm digging myself into a 4-digit, 5-digit, 6-digit financial debt. So what were you looking for as metrics, as not vanity metrics, not like social media clicks and likes that usually are nice to have and make you feel better, but are not always a good predictor for business success? What was leading you to know that you're getting in the right direction, keeping you up, sleeping, I guess, not keeping you up at night?
Yeah, for sure. So there was two distinct stages. The first one was, we licensed somebody else's hardware first, just to, bring it into places and say, okay, does this resonate with you? Like, the verbal would you purchase, which, it's a bit wishy-washy. But once we committed to building our own garden, we convinced ourselves, based on, you know, the market research, everything, that there is a niche here for us. We just took the renderings, because renderings you can make pretty quickly, and said, can we get people to put down $100 pre-order on this hypothetical $1,000 garden? And how many of these can we get? And hypothetically, we know what our development costs are going to be. How many of these do we need to break even on our first production run? And that was the biggest metric for us for the instant pre-orders. That was before we actually had a product with photography to sell. It was simply based on the concept in this computer rendering. What can we do? And then the second set of metrics was when we were building it was the development timelines. Was, you know, we set out a project schedule, and were we getting there? Like, was it possible?
So what you're telling me is people were willing to put down $100 to pre-order something simply because you created a computer image and showed it to them and told them the story of what it's good for.
Yes. Yeah. And this was absolutely crazy to me at the time, because I was a grad student, and you're in the broke grad student mindset where you're like, $100 goes a long way. And then you realize, you know what, well, there's a lot of people out there who believe in entrepreneurship, sustainability, trying new things, who, for them, sure, they'll put down $100, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So many things that you don't think of as a student, right? Because you're in a different financial reality. I'm looking at the clock, and we've been chatting for close to half an hour. I want to see if anybody here wants to ask any question either. Do you have any?
I actually wonder, how does it look like? Like, do you have any like website or photos, or even the first video you had done to show us? Like, I'm really curious to see how is that, because I do have similar problems, like, and I kind of did similar solutions. Like, I love eating green onions, and I hate buying them and getting bad like in a day. So I usually plant them, I buy them, I plant them, and then I keep growing them, and then once they get bad, I buy it over. So I'm really curious to see the solution you got for it.
For sure. I can pop my screen up here. So that's what it looks like now. And I'm going to see if I can find one of my way back pictures of the first one in here. But this one, the one you're seeing this is the Ava, the larger of our two. And some of the cool things is there's actual, like, all the cords, all the pipes and everything is all hidden away back there behind, and it just waters itself. It's fully automated, waters itself 48 times a day. The grow lights are that white post there in the middle, so it's 2 LED grow lights, automated, turn on and off automatically. The water tank's down below, and you only add water once every 2 weeks. And it's, you know, down to that, it's like, this will grow while you're gone. Now I can pop up a picture of what this looked like in development, when we say like we were doing it ourselves, right? Like, they're not pretty pictures.
I remember that.
Yeah. It's like, this is what this stuff looks like, you know, at the beginning. Like, that's our water reservoir. It was literally a plastic bag over wood. You can see, like, we literally drilled these things out. There's a lot of duct tape gets used, 3D printing pods. You know, that was the first concept of, okay, what are the corners going to look like? Like, what's the form factor going to look like? Obviously no cabinet on it. And then this is actually the first rendering. So this was the one that we were selling people on. They would see this picture, and this is where we'd get $100.
I'll put my $100 in there for sure. Yeah. Love it.
So, yeah, from all that to where it's at now.
Is there any thoughts on making it like a small version of it that you could fit on the, I don't know, on a desk or so? Or
Yes.
that's only problem you guys have so far?
So we've got 2 other ones, which I can show you. So we've got the smaller, like the condo sized one, which is this one here. Take a second to load. So it's about half the size or half the width and a little shorter. And it does the same thing, except this one's truly optimized for lettuces, leafy greens, and herbs, not tomatoes or flowering plants. In terms of the countertop version, we stay away from it primarily because that's what other people do really well. And it's, you know, obviously there's a market there because there's a company worth $100 million that does just that. But there's also 20 other companies who are trying to do that. Whereas we niche down, and this is our niche, is, you know, these more furniture looking ones. And then we also do way larger like this. So this is, those walls are about 20 feet tall and 16 feet wide. So we'll do entire rooms or entire, you know, lobbies, commercial offices. So we're kind of but anything between 2,000 to 2,000 square feet, we say is our sweet spot.
That's super interesting. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah, I clearly can see now how your company is actually being different from the competitor and like how you actually found a space for you. Yeah, it's definitely completely different with what I had seen so far. Yeah, congrats. It's nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody online wants to ask any questions? So if Anson or Charlotte, are you there? Do you want to ask any question?
Can I ask one more? Oh, okay, sure.
I was just gonna ask what your experience with like the evolution of like costs, because I know you asked originally for like the $100 as the pre-production cost, and then as you've evolved the product, what was your experience with evolving that with your customer base and things like that?
Yeah, so we originally did our pricing based on purely what we thought people would pay and what our projected costs were if we were producing at a certain volume. Now that being said, those original projections, we made a critical mistake in that they were based on us being able to invest $500,000 in tooling that we didn't have. So what we did early days was, you know, with those first models, is we said, okay, what do you think this is going to cost? And we got wildly different answers from, you know, $5,000 to $500. So we said, okay, what would be a healthy profit margin for us? And originally we decided on 1,000 for the core unit. It's at 1,200 now. And that also helped us find our customer niche, in that when, similar to people answering, you know, I think I'd pay $5,000 to $500 for this. You find out quickly when you say $1,200, we get one or two reactions, and it's either that's much less than I thought, or that's ridiculous. Why would anyone ever pay for it? And that's completely fine. It's just the people who say that's way less than I thought, those are our customers. And the people who say that's, you know, a crazy high price I'd never pay, they probably wouldn't pay if we reduced our price by another 200 or another 400, right? They just, the value's not there for them in the product. So that's how we did the pricing. Our costs have really changed. When we started building these, we were lucky to break even. And then, you know, as we were building them continually, say to the rate of 20 a week out of wood, what we found really quickly was our labor costs were going through the roof. And we looked at this, okay, if we want to go from 20 to 200, we need to employ 200 people, which wasn't feasible. So it was, okay, we need to go out and raise money to be able to redevelop the product, not to look different, but to build different. And, you know, the cost of the parts went up because we weren't building it ourselves from raw material, but the labor costs, you know, plummeted tenfold. So that's kind of how the price and the cost change throughout the life of the product.
And so you kind of basically say that you didn't pull a price out of the hat. You actually went there and said, how much would you price this, to kind of ground you in what people think it's worth first?
Yes, yeah, for sure. You need to know, even though we were off on our original costing, it wasn't off in the long run. You need to know what your costs are going to be to produce. And we did the financial model of, at this price, what does the rest of the business look like? At this price, what does it look like? You need to make sure it's within the bounds of reality, and then check if that resonates with the market, and if they say that's reasonable, or at least some subset of the market.
Did you also try seeing people's reaction when you put a $2,000 price tag?
We did. And it was surprising that if we didn't have a recurring revenue component of the model, where we sell the seeds and nutrients that go into the system as well, we would probably sell at 2,000, because the amount of people who buy at 2,000, it drops, but not as much as you would think for pretty much doubling the price. But for us in the long run, we've got an incentive to get these out there, to get people buying the seeds and nutrients from us.
Mm-hmm. So that's the profit margin on the disposables is better than the actual product.
Yes, yeah, and that's why it's important to first understand your cost of the product, but then the overall cost to the business.
Okay. You had another question.
Yeah,
You forgot.
I think I forgot. I think it was related to like how does it grow? Like, is there a specific type of plant that grows in there? Because I saw like it was vertical, and I guess that's what the name of the company is like that. But like, how do you decide what's growing, or like, is that customized, or
Yeah, so the cool thing about plants is they'll always grow towards the light. So because the light's in the middle, they all kind of grow sideways up like this. And you can grow pretty much anything from a leafy green herb all the way up to cherry tomatoes, hot peppers. We did baby pumpkins for a school. The only thing that's not going to work is root vegetables. So potatoes, carrots, like they grow, but they grow to be like this big because the pod that holds them is only that big. And then anything beyond a bush, you just don't have the room for it. So it would grow, but it would quickly take over the system and would need more room. So between a root vegetable and a bush is the prime growing area. And the other thing is, a lot of people think of, plants grow best outdoors. Okay, that's not true. Plants survive outdoors. What we do is we actually cultivate the conditions to make plants thrive to their biological potential. So a lot of these plants can actually photosynthesize, 16, 18, some of them even 24 hours a day. Of course, you're never going to get that outside with, sunrise, sunset. But when you're indoors, we can run those grow lights as long as we want. As well, we water them 48 times a day. There's nowhere where it rains for 48 times a day for 30 seconds and then just stops and the sun comes out. So for these plants, it's always a sunny day, always a rainy day. So they grow about 2 weeks faster on average than they would outdoors.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Is there any question? What other question from online? Anson, I don't know if you have any question.
As you were doing, as your company was evolving from the first 5 years, how have you evolved your team to match the growth of the company? What was your original team versus now, and things such as that?
Yeah, so our original team, we've still got our first hire with us, who actually was there was a student who came through one of Alon's work integrated learning programs at the University of Toronto. But aside from that, we've made some key hires We brought in somebody who's been through a startup exit before, who's really strong on the marketing, sales, operations, and like process side. That's been really good in bringing discipline to the company overall. And then we've had a few people rotate out. You know, quite simply, there's people who can thrive at one stage of a company that don't do well at others, and other people that only are going to work in a later stage company versus early on. Early on, you really want people who can figure stuff out and get it done, no matter how scrappily it needs to get done. Whereas later on in the company, you're going to need more process. You're going to need people who are familiar with working with those tools and can kind of take you to the next level. But as well, like as founders, myself and my co-founder have been fortunate to have various advisors. We've got an advisory board. We've got essentially an executive coach now who's you know, there to teach us certain things. Like, as we raise money from institutional funders and a venture capital fund, like I had no idea how to run a board meeting or how to, you know, act on a board level. But you bring in these more senior people to help you out, and you got to do all that while still maintaining agility, you know, being able to deal with these things. And that's why we're lucky to, again, have that first hire still with us, because they've been through all of it and they've got great institutional knowledge of where the company's been and they're invested in where it's going.
And they came in as a student. How amazing is that?
Yeah, and we actually just hired full-time another one who started as a student with us 2 years ago and then stayed on part-time 10 hours a week for the year and a half after their semester, and is going to be starting with us full-time when they graduate in June. So it is definitely a good pathway. And from the business side, it absolutely makes sense. It's a low risk way to test out a new role or to test out a person.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Ensign, I think you were unmuting before as well.
Yeah, so I was wondering if did you look for investors, or did you rely mostly on like pre-orders and that to like fund the creation?
Yes. So we relied on investors, but relied on the pre-orders to prove market traction to the investors. So, you know, the way it was taught to us and the way we've seen it now is, unless you're somebody with multiple startup exits under your belt and you're a big name, you're not going to be able to raise money on an idea alone. You need to be able to prove some traction. So we went out and raised angel funding. It's called, you just go, they're essentially wealthy individuals, often, you know, former business people, and average check size might be anywhere between 10 to 100,000 generally. And you just get people who, you know, you go to these groups and you get people who believe in the company and the direction, who say, okay, I'm going to put in collectively, you know, 10 of us will put in $250,000. What milestone is that going to get you to? And you just build out a plan to go, okay, 250K gets me here. Where do I need to go from there? And the way we built the plan for our company was, you know, we knew we were going to have to get to the point where we're going to spend, because hardware is expensive, you know, our products, like at any one time, we might have $500,000 plus of inventory in our warehouse. Like, we needed that capital and to grow quickly, because we saw this as a market that was evolving quickly. If we didn't move fast enough, other people were going to get in. We said, okay, we need to raise, you know, angel capital, venture capital, institutional capital. And we expect we're actually going to give up this much equity and this much control for it. And as founders, we said, we're okay with that equation. You know, I've got friends who run businesses where they never raised any money, and it's, you know, supports them and, you know, to other people, and they're perfectly happy. There's no right or wrong way, generally speaking, but, you know, it's just a strategy you take. And we were lucky to be able to do it as well, because raising capital isn't a guaranteed guaranteed thing, and it nearly killed us a few times. Because once you do start raising, you start spending, and you can be on a bit of a hamster wheel till the next round.
So thinking about, I guess, capital and raising capital, how did you find these people? And I hear people asking me, I guess the two common questions I hear from students is, well, they have an idea, but they don't know how to start a team. So it's like, where do you find people to start a venture with you? So we can go to that question later. But then the second question is, well, how do I get money? Where do I find, the rich folks to give me money, right? And you can already kind of alluded to the fact that if you have no personal brand recognition because you don't have any experience, you're not going to get a blank check just like that. So I guess maybe it's a two-step question. One is where do you find people? How do you find people? And then the second part of the question is, well, once you find them, you mentioned they want to see milestones, but they probably need to see something to even accept your request for a meeting and even consider your proposal. So what is it that you have to come with for that first meeting when you do find those investors, early investors?
Yeah, so in terms of finding capital, early days, if you're doing this within the university environment, you're fortunate that there may be little grants. Like we got a lot of little grants, little checks here and there from pitch competitions, startup competitions, things like that really help you in the early days. But when you're going for that first serious fundraise, you're looking at angels, so angel investors, and often they're organized in groups. Nearly every city or region has them. Like Toronto has, they're called Maple Leaf Angels, or there's the Golden Triangle Angel Network in Southern Ontario. And these exist across the country. Like we've pitched to them in Saskatchewan and Alberta and BC. They're everywhere, and you just search angel networks for your area. And when you're in those early days, it's important to, be able to answer the questions confidently around, what are your market size? What's your product? What do you expect your margins to be? What's the business model going to be? Because at that stage, they're investing in you. And, we say at that stage, but really until you've got a business of 20 people and you're looking at, Series A, Series B and on funding, investors are investing in you as the founder and your passion and the way they perceive your ability to execute on it. So really it's knowing that and being 110% confident, at least on the outside, that you're going to do this and you're going to smash it and you're the right person for it. And as silly as it sounds, venture capital investing is very much a confidence game, and being able to say, this is the future and I'm building it. So you need to be sure you're committed and, have done your homework. They're not going to ask you technologically hard questions. They're going to ask you, the questions you would expect of an investor, but sometimes they're going to be combative. They're going to try and poke holes in it, and they're going to see how you respond. And it's being able to respond in a coachable way. They want to see, okay, they know no business is perfect. They know no plan is perfect, but are you willing to say, here are the things that could be a challenge and here's how we're going to work through them? Because especially at the angel investor, that first level they're usually more hands-on and they want to help you and they want to see you're somebody that they can work with. So you've got to have this weird, you got to be humble, but have a weird, almost like narcissistic psychopath confidence in it, while still being nice and coachable and humble, if that makes sense.
It sounds a bit like a job interview when people ask you, why are you the best person for this job? And then they ask you, what are your weaknesses? And you kind of have to say, well, I know what's bad, but I'm still the best person for this job. And and I'm willing to learn and improve, right? It's like an interesting dichotomy that people really struggle with.
Yeah, it's the startup venture capital raising equivalent of that is your competition slide. Is you've got to be able to acknowledge there are other people in the landscape that are there with successful businesses for a reason. And though, how are you going to acknowledge that while not putting them down? Because we couldn't walk in with 20,000 in revenue and say this $100 million company is doing it wrong. Like clearly they're doing certain stuff right. We're just going to do it different for a reason.
Yeah. I like you mentioned before, being humble, right? Like it really has to start with being humble and ambitious at the same time.
Yes.
So we're getting close on time. So I do want to take a step back and before everything started, you created this with Kevin, right? How did you find each other? Like, how did you start this thing together?
Yeah, for us, it was, we did our masters together, and within our master's program, you had to do your thesis and a capstone project. And one of the options was to start a hypothetical business. So this was actually completely an academic exercise for us. So I was working at one of the largest agricultural companies in the world when, people were saying to me within that role, I got to talk to the public a lot, industry surveys. A lot of people in cities were saying, I wish I could grow my own food. I feel like the agricultural system is not evolving with me and to my beliefs. And Kevin was working in the Canadian Arctic on growing food. And, we were friends. We met up for drinks one day in the summer. And I was telling him about all this. He's like, well, the technology exists, just nobody's done it properly yet for that downtown Toronto home, condo, etc. So that's where we're like, oh, this could be a cool thing to do as a capstone project. And to be honest, it seemed like kind of an easy capstone project because you didn't need to really work with any external stakeholders. You didn't need to piggyback off another company. And we had no intentions of making it real while we were doing it. Like it was our last semester. I applied for jobs, Kevin got a job, and we essentially got forced into an incubator from our program coordinator. It was like, no, this is great. You guys need to do it. And it really took off from there. But, there is a significant degree of luck in, I think, any startup. Like if one of those jobs I had applied to and hired me, like I could be working in management consulting right now and just vertical would have just lived in the academic sphere. But nobody wanted to hire me. So I got to do this. And Kevin eventually, after a few months, left his job and came to just vertical full time.
Very cool. So kids, don't drop out of schools too fast.
No, no, don't drop out of school.
Your next course could change your life.
That's right.
I started listening to a podcast that's called "What's Your Problem?" and probably my favorite question that the host asks the guests is, what is one problem, like really hard problem you're working on right now that's keeping you up at night that you really want to see solved to let you get to your next step of the company?
Yeah. So there's the one answer that I don't think ever changes because I've been saying the same thing for 3 years, and that's just capital. Like having more money makes things move faster. But I'd say for us, we're growing really fast as a business, and it's how do we put in those processes and those controls that are going to help us continue to be successful as we go from building 100 units to 1,000. And that's hard for me because I've never done it. So I'm learning and implementing at the same time with a team that's evolving from the scrappy startup to a little bit more disciplined of an approach. So, if I could slow down time so I could learn and build it, a little slower, that'd be great. But like, it's never going to be perfect when it goes in. So
the classic build the parachute while you're falling off the airplane.
Absolutely. It's, when I get a customer support complaint, I'm like, oh, that should be in the process. And it's like, if I had that before, I wouldn't be doing this, but it's how it goes.
Yeah. So I think for sake of time, we'll let you go. It's getting close to 1 p.m. here and close to drink o'clock where you are at. So Connor, really great seeing you again. And maybe in 5 years, when you have 10 years under your belt, we'll have to do it again and hear what you learned in your second, 5 year of startups of Just Vertical.
Yes, absolutely. It was great seeing you, and thanks for having me. And yeah, hopefully, 5 years I've got some wisdom, some actual wisdom to share, and be a little more disciplined, but that's the process.
That sounds good. Well, have a great afternoon in Toronto and keep on growing.
Yes, thank you. It was great meeting all of you. So yeah.
Yeah.
Bye for now.